Okay, so this is part 2, and this is called The Inquisition Doesn't Bother Me.
There's a show on CBC Radio. CBC is like Canada's state-sponsored media called Tapestry, and it airs every Sunday. They had a Catholic nun on recently when I was listening who was aggressively pronouncing her sympathy with every dissident position you could take against the Catholic Church. One of the things she said was that the Catholic Church invented torture as part of the Inquisition.
Okay. So, I don't know what this show is. I don't care what this show is. I'm not Canadian. Did the Catholic Church invent torture? Nope. But members of the Catholic Church did invent new forms of torture during the Inquisition. Yeah. But torture has been around since the beginning of humanity. People have been figuring out how to torture each other. I got books and books and books on ancient history where people figure out torture. Okay? So torture is not an invention of the Catholic Church, nor is it an invention of medieval Europe. Torture goes way back.
That's why the Catholic Church can't be relied upon as a moral authority. That claim is so audacious.
His problem here is that he's saying, okay, so since torture was not invented by the Catholic Church, the horrible crimes that the Catholic Church or members of the Catholic Church did in the name of the Catholic Church during the Inquisition and Reconquista shouldn't bother you. And it shouldn't hurt the moral authority of the Church. 500 years from now, someone on however people communicate 500 years from now, is going to make a video. And in this video, some shill is going to say, yeah, but the sexual abuse crisis wasn't really by the church, and the church didn't invent sexual abuse. I mean, it goes back to before the Bible. Before the Bible was written, there was sexual abuse. That's not a good answer, Brian.
Some people love to draw routinely from the same handful of conveniently plucked references from hundreds of years ago to make a case for why Catholics are wrong or why their voices should be marginalized in public discourse. And the Inquisition is without fail always one of them. It's easy for us to look at something like the Inquisition and see how it's incompatible with the modern world. And because it doesn't fit in here and now, we judge it as being wrong or even evil.
For those at home playing along, the Inquisition was wrong, and the acts done during the Inquisition were evil. The acts done by men, not by the church, not by God. The acts done by mortal men for political, ethnic, and racial and racist reasons were evil.
We talk a lot about diversity in the modern age. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau often says that diversity is our strength. And while I think that that's an incomplete catchphrase, but here's the thing. Diversity is one of those things that we can employ and enjoy without it disrupting too much of our harmony as a society, because there's so many other things that we can fall back on that still allow us to function well. The people of the Middle Ages did not have those same things that they could rely upon. Civilization at that time was in its infancy, so it
Truth is, I wanted to grab a copy of Herodias, my copy of Herodias, to throw it in this guy's face, but I couldn't find it. So, Bad Timber Badger, if you're watching, and you want to animate a copy of Herodias being thrown in this guy's face and give it to me as a meme, I'd love you for it. But instead, I give you Xenophon, History of My Times. I believe this was for the Middle Ages. I give you Julius Caesar, the Gallic Wars. I believe this was before the Middle Ages. Oh, how about the History of Mesopotamia? Let's see. That's the cradle of civilization. 2100 BC. Sumerian kings list, meaning they were already kings. That's long before the Middle Ages.
To get a sense of what I'm talking about, let's look at one of the pillars of civilization, something like agriculture. And by agriculture, I mean food production and farming. In the Middle Ages, a string of bad weather or drought was the kind of thing that could spell disaster.
Ethnocentric, European-centric, male-centric? Did this guy just make me an SJW? Now I really don't like him.
In spite of the fact that we don't get along very well as a society, think again diversity, and if anything we're growing more and more polarized, that doesn't really disrupt our welfare the way it would have for our ancestors.
First off, the more and more polarization thing is a complete trope and not true. It's said every year, going all the way back to when news started. It's not true. We're not more polarized. Just look at any study that Jordan Peterson likes to quote in any of his feeds. We're at peace. I mean, we're at peace for the longest amount of time we've ever been at peace, at least in the West. So this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. In the media, we're more polarized, but luckily we don't live on TV.
Fall back
Says
on
the
things
guy
like
on a
technology,
YouTube
like
channel.
what I just described with agriculture, and other things like modern medicine and affordable energy sources and manufacturing methods that give us access to material wealth that only our richest ancestors could have afforded. Simply put, we're spoiled enough that the luxury of diverse catastrophe for us if we embrace it.
I might be stuck in a box.
So this meant that people had to work hard together in a very harmonious way if they were going to realize stability and survival.
As opposed to the Peloponnesian War, as opposed to the Greek Dark Ages, as opposed to the Sengoku period in Japan, as opposed to the Warren State period in China, as opposed to the Aztec period in Mexico, as opposed to, I don't know, the Roman invasion in Britain. I mean, there's more than a few times in history when people had to band together to survive. Athens lost, by the way, and Sparta won. But they banded together.
And worked together
Athenian
in spite
League.
of personal differences. That unifying force was Christianity. It gave them a moral, spiritual...
In China, that unifying force was money. In Russia, it was communism. In... what's the country called? Arabia. Big religion. Islam? I bet you we can find a country very large where it was Buddhism. And I bet you in another country it was Shintoism. But what do I know? You probably have several degrees. I'm just a martial artist with an AA.
It's also what helped establish much of their national identity. Tribalism and ethnicity were the kinds of differences that could be overcome because of this common denominator.
As opposed to Christian tribalism. That never happens.
Which also meant that straying from those common beliefs was the kind of thing that could disrupt the harmony.
Must obey. Must do as I am told. If you do not tell me what to do, my life will fall apart. I am Hispanic and short. I cannot grab things from the top shelf. Please help me.
So to depart from the Christian faith was to depart from that single vision that arguably was needed to uphold some semblance.
You mean the Christian faith that is based off of Judaism? The first half of the Bible that helped structure society in many cultures? You mean the society that's based on paganism that conquered the world multiple times and united people? Including under, I don't know, the Macedonian Empire, the Roman Empire, the Seleucid Empire, the Babylonian Empire, other empires? Did Japan have an empire without Christianity? Was there a Chinese empire? I wonder if I come over here, but I wonder... See, I got these weird books. I don't know if you know what they are. They're called history books. They're really weird. See, like there's this whole thing of societies that held together before Christianity. I don't know how that's even possible. Anyway, so like, and then there's these 2 volumes of just Chinese history. I I don't know how this country held together without Christianity. I'm so glad you're here, Brian, to help hold society together.
And because it was so vital, apostasy from the faith was often treated like treason. And because Christianity was such an essential part of the progress of civilization, it should come as no surprise that laws were established that varied from place to place, but nonetheless these laws existed that treated heresy really severely. And in order for these heresies to become a problem, they had to be publicly declared and adamantly defended. Now, this was, in the case of the Inquisition, only applicable to Christians. We have this misconception that
Dear Christian and Catholic apologist, as someone who loves being Catholic, as someone who's took his martial arts channel and dedicated months to just talking religion and still does debates against atheists and anti-theists, never defend the Inquisition this way. Never. He's about to say, but he didn't go after the Jews. Watch my previous video for how I dismantle that.
Jews and Muslims and pagans were routinely rounded up by the Inquisition and tortured to death, and that's simply not true. And if that kind of thing did happen, it was in direct contradiction of what the Inquisition was set up to be and to do. So this idea that witch burnings and witch hunts were a common thing imposed by the Inquisition is just a complete myth.
780 people at the low estimate, 800 people at a high estimate, 160,000 people expelled, 300,000 people expelled altogether, or forced to convert, and approximately 2.2 million people currently still being affected by the consequences of the Inquisition. But it only affected a small number. I hear there was only 8 people in Portugal. Yay, Portugal. Wonder what happened in Spain, or France, or Mexico, or New Mexico.
They could be pressured into condemning someone unfairly. And this is why the Inquisition was established.
Like Joan of Arc?
To prevent that exact kind of thing from happening. They needed theological experts that could examine the publicly confessed beliefs of the accused and render a judgment. The Inquisition existed to protect people from unjust persecution by ignorant and uninformed authority.
Buddy, I notice you don't seem very strong. I notice you seem kind of weak. I notice that you kind of stand out from everybody else. You kind of got red hair and pale skin. The sun might hurt you. I'll tell you what. I'll protect you. But you got to pay me. But don't worry. I'm doing it for your own good. You just got to give me everything I ask for whenever I ask for and never question it. And if I tell you you have to change your religion to whatever religion I'm practicing, you got to do it. Did I mention I'm possibly an atheist or maybe a Buddhist or Shintoist or a Taoist? But it doesn't matter because I'm doing it for your own good. I'm doing it to protect you and your civilization. But don't worry. I'm only going to affect you because you're now a Taoist. Oh, by the way, you're now a Taoist because I told you you're a Taoist, because if you don't become a Taoist, I'm going to have to get a little rough because I'm kind of protecting you now. And if I'm going to protect you, and you kind of have to be a Taoist for me to protect you. It's just kind of a thing because I'm a Taoist and you got to be a Taoist. You know, it's fine. It's fine. 500 years from now, there's going to be a guy on a thing called YouTube who's going to be talking about how me protecting you is a good thing. And if that guy says it's true, it's obviously true.
Now, regarding torture, yes, torture was permitted, but you have to understand the context in which the Inquisition appears. The Inquisition employed torture in a way that was far less frequent and far more restricted than the civil authorities. And in fact, even some inquisitors like Nicholas Emmerich spoke out against torture because confessions gained through torture, he said, were misleading and futile. The church placed significant restrictions upon its use.
You just admitted that the Catholic Church understood it was a bad thing, that the people in charge of these incidences may have had access to knowledge that said it was a bad thing, and yet they did it anyway, and you're trying to say that that's a good.
For example, wasn't allowed to use a confession gained in torture to convict or sentence somebody. They also had other kinds of restrictions, like you couldn't draw blood or do anything that would cause permanent damage. The most amount of time you...
I literally just read documents directly from Jewish accounts that say the opposite.
Could inflict a session of torment was 15 minutes, and they always had to have a doctor present to make sure that they weren't going to do anything that was going to cause serious harm.
I'll tell you what, Brian. Conor McGregor, he hasn't been fighting very well. How about I put you in a ring with Conor McGregor? But don't worry. I used to be an underground fighter, and I know how to I know how to be a good ring man. So you'll be fine. Nothing bad will happen. And if you want, I got a friend who's a nurse. He can be there too. I got a friend who's a doctor. She can be there too. And even though we're friends, and even though we're all on the same page about not liking what you say, we will totally protect you should Conor McGregor hurt you inside an MMA ring. Does that sound reasonable to you?
But again, you have to judge things in the appropriate context, because people have this idea that the Church and the Inquisition were these brutal entities that were leading the charge and encouraging brutality and torture, when in fact they were by far the most humane in their application by placing all of these kinds of restrictions that none of the civil authorities observed.
I'm going to go back to something that I don't know if I said in the previous video or in this video. Let's see. Child abuse is going on right now in the church. But what is it you just said? Let me play that again. Maybe I heard you wrong.
Were leading the charge and encouraging brutality and torture, when in fact they were by far the most humane in their application by placing all of these kinds of restrictions.
So, according to you, if we apply the same logic, the Catholic Church right now is making a lot of rules against child abuse. So the child abuse that happened isn't that bad because it's better than the child abuse that happens outside of the Catholic Church? I don't think that works. I'm sorry, Brian. I don't think that works. And I don't think anyone else thinks that works. I don't. You know, the Muslims have this thing for, like, you got to beat your wife with a feather. I'm going to say domestic violence is bad regardless of the implement being used. I'm going to say torture is bad regardless of the reason behind using the torture. Also, if a crime happened before there was a law, like let's say, I don't know, lynching a black man before civil rights, or a murder before the Hammurabi Code or before the Draconian law codes existed, if there was a crime like murder or theft, it was fine before the law existed. You are Catholic, right? Universal. You do believe there are moral absolutes, don't you?
But the point I would want to make is that these things didn't occur because of the Inquisition. These kinds of evils existed back then and continue to exist today throughout the world. And if they were done over the course of the Inquisition...
See my previous comment? Just apply it here.
If the Inquisition should be remembered for anything in the context that it existed, it should be remembered for how much it did to protect the dignity and rights of the accused.
To protect the dignity and rights of the accused. The Inquisition. Seriously, I had a video a while back where I jokingly made a jab at that Catholic couple, and I do regret doing that. I don't regret talking down to this guy. He needed correction. Look, Brian, you need to correct yourself. You need a little bit of, what's the term? What's a good Catholic term here? What do you need, buddy? What do you need? Okay, because I can tell you this. That ain't the words of Jesus coming out of your mouth. And you know it. You know it. Jesus would never condone torture. Jesus would never condone the mass rape of people. He would never condone anything like that. He would never condone the exile of his own people to misery. Not Jesus. Jesus wouldn't hate people, torture people, harm people, take from people. He wasn't a thief. There were specific laws in the Old Testament against usury. You're wrong, Brian, and you know it. Don't defend the church like this. Don't do this. Apologize to the Jewish people you have insulted, the Sephardic people specifically, by doing this video. Leave this video up, but make a response apologizing, not to me, but to the Sephardic people who have had to suffer under repression, under oppression, under persecution. Be a man. Do what's right. Be a Christian.